The hearing will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Today's hearing is held jointly by the Subcommittees on Oversight and Investigations and Technology Modernization. It is entitled The Status of the Department of Veterans Affairs Financial Management Business Transformation. For years, VA's Inspector General has reported that the financial management is a major challenge for the department. The Financial Management Business Transformation, or FMBT, is an effort to modernize VA's financial management practices. We're here today to examine whether VA's current plan for FMBT is realistic. Strong financial management is about VA keeping an accurate track of taxpayer dollars to avoid waste and fraud. Financial management affects all of the important services that VA provides our veterans on a day-to-day basis, like getting medical supplies to VA hospitals to ensure veterans receive high-quality care, paying GI Bill benefits to help veterans pursue higher education, processing loan guarantees to help veterans achieve the goal of home ownership. Financial management is also about the department's ability to use reliable budget and spending data to make smart cost-benefit decisions. To put it simply, the need for strong financial management and effective IT systems underlies all of VA's operations. Unfortunately, VA's financial management faces some major problems. The department's current financial management system is around 30 years old, and in VA's own words, relying on these antiquated and unintegrated IT systems presents a risk to VA operations. I understand that the department's obsolete financial IT systems require costly manual workarounds to meet VA's financial accountability needs, and this makes it much more difficult for the department to serve our veterans in a cost-efficient and effective manner. It's noteworthy that although the department passes its annual financial audit, it continues to have multiple material weaknesses in internal financial controls. As we heard in the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee hearing in September, the financial management system also contributes to VA's improper payments and debt collection processes, which can be particularly difficult on our veterans. Fortunately, VA recognizes these major challenges. But here's the problem. Twice before, VA has tried to replace its financial management system, first in 1998 and then in 2006. Both previous attempts failed after years of development and a loss of hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. I hope to hear today how VA has incorporated lessons learned from these past attempts at financial modernization. I'm sure that the department agrees that we simply can't afford another failed attempt at improving financial management. VA is now saying it may take 10 years to implement FMBT. Yes, the current plan is to complete the project in the year 2030, and we should ask ourselves if this is the best plan for success. Implementation of the new financial management system also depends on the success of other significant IT projects across the agency, which are also seeing signs of trouble. And so the question should be asked if this could derail FMBT. Although implementing new integrated IT systems is important, robust financial management practices require a strong and knowledgeable workforce. In other words, it's about people. I hope to hear today about how VA plans to train its employees across the agency on how to effectively use this new system and new business processes. These steps will be critical to ensure successful implementation of the new financial management system. While FMBT is not a cure-all for VA's challenges, its success is critical to improving financial management at the department. Ultimately, strong financial management is necessary to help VA serve the veteran community as effectively and efficiently as possible. We all agree that we owe our veterans nothing less than that. With that, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Bergman for 5 minutes for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Banks is delayed because of a family emergency, but will be joining us as soon as he can. He has asked me to make opening remarks on behalf of the both of us. So with that, veterans are best served when both sides of this committee are working together, and I thank you for agreeing to hold this hearing. We are here today to take the first serious look by any committee at the VA Financial Management Business Transformation Program, known as FMBT. VA's existing financial management and accounting systems are antiquated, disconnected, and inconsistent across business lines. These systems are the root cause of multiple material weaknesses in VA's annual financial statement audit year after year. It is a testament to the tenacity of our witnesses that the department consistently manages to pass the audit despite these inhibiting factors. FMBT began in 2016 when VA partnered with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, under a shared services arrangement to purchase and implement CGI's Momentum software. At the time, VA explained that the current system used to produce the financial statements, FMS, may have just 5 to 7 years of operational life remaining. However, on December 5th, 2017, exactly 2 years ago today, USDA canceled its agreement, and VA decided to continue with the Momentum implementation on its own. I understand the professed importance of FMBT, but am uncomfortable with the fact that this program has changed dramatically and repeatedly since its inception. Since FMBT's initiation, the completion date is stretched from 2025 to 2028 to 2030. The number of implementation waves has increased from 18 to 33, and its life cycle cost estimate has increased from $887 million to over $2.3 billion with a B, which includes the roughly $380 million expended thus far. But VA has only implemented one minor software module to date in one of the department's smallest business lines. The current schedule does not even contemplate starting to implement Momentum in the Veterans Health Administration, which is by far the largest VA organization with over 340,000 employees, until 2023. If the prediction of FMS ceasing to function is correct, we only have 2 to 4 years before that happens, but FMBT will not complete for roughly 10 years, so we've got a gap. I want to know how dire the situation truly is with FMS and the other systems that are slated for replacement. If the situation is dire, and if installing Momentum will yield demonstrable benefits in terms of efficiency and cost avoidance, we need to have a serious conversation about whether completion in 2030 is appropriate. Further, I want to know whether the current life cycle cost estimate is conclusive and durable, and how it would change if the schedule could be accelerated. It seems very possible that some of these underlying assumptions were made when USDA was involved, but were never reevaluated after the model collapsed. Additionally, I'm a firm believer in the importance of clear chains of command and streamlined organizational structures. FMBT has cycled through 3 different organizational models in just over 3 years. The confidence that our witnesses express in the current structure is encouraging, but I need to better understand it. The Office of Management, under the CFO, Mr. Rychalski, is being asked to lead all the other VA organizations in an IT project that involves a complex redesign of their business processes. This is a new role for the office. Today, I hope to explore where accountability and authority for each decision lies. Above all else, I want to understand exactly what to expect from FMBT and when to expect it. The fact of the matter is, FMBT is one of the largest modernization efforts underway in VA, but has almost entirely slipped under the radar until now. Congress and the taxpayers deserve to know what we are getting into before we are in so deep that there is no way to change course. If FMBT's value proposition is persuasive, it is our duty to make sure the program receives the attention and resources necessary to be successful. Again, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank you for agreeing to hold this hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Bergman. I'd now like to recognize Chair Lee for 5 minutes for some opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Like many federal agencies, the Department of Veterans Affairs is on a necessary but challenging journey to update its aging and antiquated IT systems. Many of these systems are not visible to the average observer, but they're critical systems that support the backbone of all VA operations. And without them, the VA cannot deliver the care and services that our veterans have earned. A veteran may not necessarily directly touch the systems that support financial management, but these systems touch almost every aspect of VA operations. They are what ensures that the VA gets the bills paid correctly and on time. They're how the VA ensures that programs have the resources they need to provide necessary services. They are also what gives the VA the data to make informed budgeting decisions every year. The systems that do all of this are currently 30 years old and use archaic coding language. They are unsustainable and have reached the end of their useful life many years over. The current condition of these systems leaves the VA vulnerable to risk, cybersecurity problems, and bad financial decisions. In turn, these conditions can lead to harm to veterans and their families. The need to replace these legacy systems is clear, but the ongoing effort to do this raises questions about whether VA is approaching this modernization effort in an efficient and effective way. The new system must connect to numerous other VA IT systems, such as the EHRM, many of which are also undergoing modernization. Having so many dependent systems and so much enterprise-wide change increases the risk to this project. Further, it appears that the VA is facing the same problems that plagued and led to failure of other IT modernization programs, including the lack of clear governance structure, inadequate and shifting requirements development, and uncertain resources. In the case of FMBT, schedules have already shifted and funding have lagged. I brought this notional time frame just really to underscore the underlying complexity of what we're undergoing here. You know, and on top of that, we have had a $14 million shortfall out of a $2.5 billion project. That may seem small, but it leads to strained decision-making, taking shortcuts at early stages, and not making the necessary investments to support the overall program. The funding issue, as I understand it, was partly because of a lack of funding from the Office of Information and Technology, which is very concerning. We need to better understand OIT's role in this enterprise-wide effort. While it may be necessary to refine a modernization plan, adjust schedules, and adapt to changing conditions, I'm concerned that the VA has not demonstrated a high level of fidelity in its current plan. We have heard the Secretary say that the VA's business transformation is a priority, but we need more definitive answers about how and when, about the how and the when of the FMBT program, if it is supposed to support this transformation. I know the leadership here today is capable and wants this program to succeed. Without modernization, there is no way the VA's financial health will improve. However, without the necessary governance, accountability, and the resources, there is no way the VA will be able to successfully implement the systems it needs to support good financial management. Again, thank you to all the witnesses for being here, and I look forward to getting into the details of this program. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Chairwoman Lee. We have representatives from the Department of Veterans Affairs with us here this morning to discuss this important project. First, Mr. John Rachalski, Assistant Secretary for Management and Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Rachalski has served in this role since December of 2017. He's accompanied by two additional representatives from the department. First, we have Ms. Terry Riffle, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Financial Management Business Transformation. Finally, we have Mr. Daniel McCune, Executive Director of the Enterprise Portfolio Management Office. Mr. Rachalski will provide testimony for the department, and each of the VA witnesses will respond to questions. The subcommittee thanks you all for appearing today, and Mr. Rachalski, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you. Chairs Pappas and Lee, Ranking Member Bergman, and distinguished members of the subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of the Department of Veterans Affairs' efforts to modernize its legacy financial management systems through the Financial Management Business Transformation, or FMBT, program. Successful deployment of FMBT is the most impactful thing we can do for VA's financial health. This effort is both high risk and high reward. We have 2 previous attempts at replacing the VA's legacy financial system. I was a new consultant just out of the Air Force with the prime contractor on one of the attempts, Core FLS, that was not successful, so I am aware of how difficult something like this can be. FMBT arguably had its own rough start. What began as a shared service partnership with the U.S. Department of Agriculture abruptly transitioned to a sole VA-led effort when USDA pulled out of the deal. This might have been the best thing that could have happened for this program. We painstakingly built very close relationships with our business partners, both internal and external. I firmly believe we, the collective VA we, are best positioned to execute this implementation with strong business partners like CGI, Deloitte, and many others. The VA's current financial management system, FMS, is 30 years old and is increasingly difficult to maintain. But setting aside age, the real challenge is functionality. To give some perspective, I'd like to briefly share a common accounting scenario, how it is done under today and then under FMS, how it is done today under FMS and what it will look like under FMBT. Currently, when a contract is awarded in our contract management system, the award amount is not forwarded to the financial management system for processing. Instead, communication from contracting personnel to finance personnel to manually enter the award amount into the financial management system is required. This redundant keying of information is error-prone and is frequently overlooked, necessitating tedious and time-consuming reconciliation of the contract management and financial management systems. Under FMBT, the financial impact of the contract award action, as well as any subsequent changes to the contract, will be automatically recorded and forever linked to the contract award, thus eliminating the need for reconciliations and strengthening the accuracy of financial reporting and increasing the speed and accuracy of payments to contractors. One of the most important attributes to achieving success in an implementation of this complexity is strong commitment from senior leadership. FMBT is paired with logistics and HR systems modernization in one of the Secretary's top 3 priorities that we refer to as our business system transformation effort. I meet with the Secretary and Deputy Secretary daily as part of the Secretary's Sync meeting. It's noteworthy that this is the first Secretary in my tenure that has included the CFO in daily Sync meetings. We routinely discuss progress on this transformation. Equally important is the person leading the day-to-day effort. I carefully selected the FMBT leader, Ms. Terry Riffle, who formerly headed our Financial Services Center. Ms. Riffle started her VA career 33 years ago at the VA Medical Center in Columbia, South Carolina. She has the experience and credibility to lead this effort. She also has experience successfully leading 2 recent major system deployments, Concur Travel and VATAS Time and Attendance, which were both deployed VA-wide. Our current FMBT deployment schedule takes roughly 10 years to complete. That is a long time. We also recently made a schedule change that moves the Veterans Health Administration 2 years to the right. We made this decision because we are deploying FMBT at a unique time, concurrent with the deployment of our new electronic health record and a new medical logistics system, the DoD's Defense Medical Logistics Standard Support, or DMLS system. But it gets more complicated than that. The accounting system must be tightly linked to the logistics system to ensure ordering, delivering, and payments are seamless. Some of you may recall the debacle during the Core FLS deployment when the accounting system, logistics system, and users could not function together and surgeries had to be canceled because medical supplies and equipment were not available. This has real-life risk. It just so happens that in the same time frame that DMLS is being deployed across the VA, the DMLS system itself will be upgraded to a more modern, cloud-based version called Logical. This presents a unique challenge in that if we deploy FMBT quickly, we will need to connect the financial system to the logistics system 2 separate times with 2 major training initiatives. Our current schedule has us connecting to the final cloud-based version, Logical, 1 time with 1 set of training. Faster deployment means more disruption to end users, technical rework, cost, and risk. Slower deployment means it will take longer to get the full benefits of the FMBT system. None of us working on this program are satisfied with a 10-year deployment. The next year will be very telling with respect to accelerating our schedule. The electronic health record, DMLS, and FMBT are all scheduled to be deployed in various locations for initial operational capability in 2020. With respect to costs, I'm happy to report that we were within our planned budget. The current estimate for FMBT full deployment is roughly $2.5 billion. Our most significant funding issue is access to IT funds. The IT budget is stretched very thin with many new and costly requirements associated with the Mission Act, Colmery Act, needed infrastructure upgrades, and a seemingly endless list of system enhancements that improve service to veterans. IT funding is an additional hurdle that must be overcome if we ultimately accelerate the deployment. I'm proud of the progress we have made and look forward to a big year in 2020. Our deep collaboration with and unwavering support from VA administrations and staff offices has given the program the flexibility and adaptability to work through any issue and handle the funding challenges to date. With the NCA implementation on schedule for go-live in July 2020, FMBT is poised for success. Chairs Pappas and Lee, Ranking Member Bergman, and members of the subcommittee, this concludes my statement. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now move on to the questioning period of the hearing, and I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. I think no one here disagrees with the fact that we need to modernize the financial management at the department. That fact is very clear. But there is deep concern about failed attempts in the past, and I want to zero in on what lessons were learned from those 2 failed attempts and other implementation efforts that have gone on across the VA about how you can focus your efforts here, and would ask that of all 3 members of the panel.
Sure, I'll give you my perspective. I mentioned that I was on Core FLS as a contractor and had been a contractor off and on for about 10 years. My impression is, having been a consultant, that many times the agency that we were supporting was in a better position, frankly, to lead the effort. A lot of times they turned it over to the contractor who did not understand the business nearly as well. And so I think number one for me is it should be government-led. I think that the leadership team, support from senior leadership is incredibly important. And beyond that, I think one of the most important things is absolutely having buy-in from the administration, staff offices, the customers, both internal and external. I know that Terry Riffle was here for both previous deployments, and I think she probably has some insight as well she could share.
Thank you.
So I would just add a couple of things. So first of all, the involvement from the end users is critical. So I was on the VATAS deployment. One of the key lessons learned from that is that you need to be on site, both boots on the ground before, during, and after, as VA requires that. Most of you know VA doesn't handle change very well. So making sure that we actually are supporting those end users, providing the training, and being there in person. They need face-to-face contact whenever you're doing that. So that was a major lesson learned, that with Core FLS, we didn't have as much there as we needed. So that was a big deal. And then I would just echo what Mr. Rykowski said in terms of the contractor run. So if you look at the audit reports from most of those, you'll see that the government oversight was inadequate, and we've significantly addressed that in this particular effort.
From an IT perspective, I would echo what Ms. Riffle just said. A lot of the lessons learned that we had around those prior efforts, we're having contractors in charge. We have government IT people in charge on this program. The other thing that we often saw on prior projects or failed projects is requirements. And clearly, those requirements need to be clearly defined before we start the IT development. And if there are changes once we start development, then that's rework. I'm fairly confident that through our requirements processes on this program, we are where we need to be, particularly for NCA.
Ms. Riffle, Mr. Rachalski called FMBT high risk, high reward. Would you agree with those comments?
Yeah, so independent on its own, it's complex. Adding EHRM and logical increases the complexity, as we all know. So I would absolutely echo that.
Could you comment on the need for integration? And FMBT is only going to be successful if it can be successfully integrated with other IT projects that are ongoing. How's the prospect for that looking?
So we're actively engaged with those 2 other major initiatives. We have staff that are integrated into both at the senior level, at the leadership and governance level, as well as the technical level, as they're having detailed discussions around how they're going to do both interim and future state for those 2 initiatives. So we're highly involved. The reason why we have to be connected with logical is when you look at the supply chain. There's the requisitioning piece, the purchasing, the receipting. There's a lot of activities that, quite frankly, there's overlap between what we're doing. We have to look at it functionally and determine where's the appropriate place for that to occur. So very, very necessary for us to be there so we don't impact patient care at all.
Yeah. Mr. Rachalski, I was encouraged to hear you say that you support an expedited timeframe, faster than 10 years in terms of the implementation. When do you think VA will be able to develop a finer schedule on that if acceleration is appropriate?
So I mean, first, I'd like to have a win under our belt. I'm looking forward to NCA in 2020 to prove, and I feel very positive about this program. I was very nervous when I took over, and USDA was running this and sort of fell apart. I knew this was high risk. I saw the schedule. Early on, though, I wondered about the schedule. We talked about some acceleration, but because of complexities on the front end with interfaces, we sort of waited. What I would say is that through this year, with our deployment to NCA and VBA, with the deployment of the electronic health record and DIMLs, I think we'll have a better sight picture of how complicated all of that is, how successful we are with FMBT, how disruptive EHRM and DIMLs is to the sites that it's going to. Because keep in mind, depending on how we do this, if you were a VA Medical Center director, you could have a an electronic health record coming in, you could have a new logistics system coming in, and depending on where we try to wedge ourselves in, you could have us at the same time or just after. At a time when more veterans are coming to VA medical centers wanting more care, frankly, and so we have to sort of weigh that. My biggest concern is that we would disrupt or somehow affect patient care, which is what happened with Core FLS when I was involved. So what I would say is by the end of 2020, I think that we'll have a much better idea of what is possible. The one thing I'll qualify, though, is I think the first rollout is not going to be like the second. I was at DoD when we rolled out the electronic health record recently there, Cerner, and even though we thought I really thought we knew everything, we had everything planned. No plan survives contact with the enemy. It was a very rough first year, and they were just doing the electronic health record, right? They already had DIMLs in place, and they weren't doing a financial system. But after that, they sort of, they got their sea legs, so to speak, and they moved out, I think, more smartly. And so the first year, we're going to see what happens, but it won't be like the second and third because things are going to get smoother, so even more will be possible. Kind of a long-winded way of saying I need at least through this year to see how we do, and then even more may be possible once we know, like after the second implementation of some of these.
Thanks. I hope we can continue to unpack that a bit, but my time is up. So I'd like now to turn to Mr. Banks and recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rachalski, what happens if FMS, the current system, fails? What's the impact of that, and what's the mitigation strategy?
So I don't think FMS is going to fail. I mean, I agree it's frail. It goes down routinely. It's harder and harder to find people to work on this system. But the analogy I would give you is, when I was new in the Air Force, I worked in an aircraft maintenance squadron. We had the B-52. And I remember my maintenance supervisor telling me that, we have pilots today that are flying the same airframes that their fathers flew. This aircraft is past its life expectancy, and it's not going to be around much longer. But you know what? I think they're still flying it. And so what I would say is, because it's not like a law of physics, if we have to, and I prefer not to, but if we have to limp along with FMS longer, we can. It's not that it can't be done. It just becomes more problematic the longer we go. And I asked Terry Riffle, who has much more experience, and Dan to also chime in with that. But that's sort of my take.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that, we have the experts that we need in place today to make sure that, if a file bends or whatever, we can actually, come up. So, for that reason, I think we would be able to maintain it. We wouldn't be able to do improvements, and potentially legislative changes would be impacted. But otherwise, we would be able to maintain it.
All right, let's move on. Mr. Rachalski or Ms. Riffle, John Wyndham reports directly to the Deputy Secretary as head of EHRM, and the Deputy Secretary is responsible for all the program's funding. Those arrangements were put in place to encourage accountability. What similar arrangements exist for FMBT?
So I think I can answer that. So I'm responsible for FMBT. I report directly to the Deputy Secretary. As I mentioned, I meet with the Secretary and Deputy Secretary daily, and Terry Riffle reports to me directly. So I think we have a pretty flat organizational chart.
Okay. Mr. Rachalski, what could we do to elevate FMBT's level of prioritization within the department, given your previous answer?
I mean, I think it's one of the top 3 priorities. Mixed in with DIMLs and the HR system modernization. I know it hasn't got a lot of publicity, and I think that's probably because of EHRM, But within the department, it is a high priority. We discuss it, we work it daily, we discuss it daily with the secretary. And so I know maybe from your perspective it doesn't seem like it, but within the department, it is a high priority. And I don't, from my own perspective, I have not seen that it needs to be, brought up any higher. I have no problems with, approaching the secretary if we have issues or whatever, so.
Ms. Riffle, is the program management office that you lead fully staffed? If not, how many available positions are there that are open?
Yeah, so we have a total of 46 full-time equivalents. We're recruiting for about 12 right now. We also have some that are paused because the VHA was moved to the right, but otherwise fully staffed and certainly supported by both Deloitte and CGI from a contractor perspective.
You consider the office fully staffed?
Once we start Veterans Health Administration, we will add to that staffing.
How many of those are government employees and how many are contractors?
So 46 are full-time equivalent government. We have right now probably around 380 total contractors between all the contracts that are supporting the effort.
Okay, so there are a lot of people working for FMBT or FBMT who do not report to you directly. For example, there are employees of OIT, the Office of Acquisition, and the National Cemetery Administration. How do you coordinate all those people and enforce accountability?
Yeah, so we are actually a matrixed organization. So, one of the provisions when I came over is I wanted to leverage the Financial Services Center IT staff. They're actually under the franchise fund. They report directly under Dan McCune, but the existing relationship that I had with the alignment of business and IT in that organization and the delivery of capability that we had had in the past, that was very important for me to gain that IT relationship that already existed and bring it with me to this program. IT agreed with that. We're leveraging that IT staff, and I would tell you we're in a much better position as a result.
You provided the committee an organizational chart, but there were very few names noted in the chart. Could you provide us an updated organizational chart to show which positions are filled and
Absolutely.
who those
yeah.
individuals are?
We
Thank
can
you very
take
much.
that.
I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Banks. I'll now turn things over to Chairwoman Lee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to delve in a little bit to the structure of the financial management of the VA, because looking at the organizational chart, it is very decentralized. Mr. Richowski, how many CFOs does the VA have?
Well, I would say at least 4. I mean, many people call themselves CFO. There's a CFO for each of the administrations or each appropriation. So, NCA, VHA, VBA, and the OIT appropriation, and myself, I guess you'd say, so 5.
But there's other there's other people with the CFO title.
People that call themselves like a CFO of a specific program or office, but I'd say 5 real CFOs.
And of the 5, what authority and oversight do you have of those?
I don't have direct authority over the administration CFOs. They report to their respective undersecretary.
Is it really possible to manage the VA's finances with this structure?
I mean, in my honest opinion, it is. And I've mentioned this, people have asked me this before. Would I be any more effective if they reported to me? Factually, I don't know that would be the case. There'd be a different dynamic. If all of the, the resource or accounting assets reported up through me, it would still be embedded in VA medical centers, and there could be a new tension. One of the tenets of command is that you have command of the assets that you're responsible for. So when you get down to the visit in the VA medical center, arguably they should have control over their financial people. So I don't know that it would be any better necessarily.
Well, can you say with confidence that you have oversight of and transparency into the VA's spending, major spending?
I can say I have transparency that is greatly limited by FMS, I will acknowledge. But I do have an excellent relationship with the CFOs. I think I have absolute transparency into the spending, yes.
And who has the oversight?
Well, I'd say me overall for the financial program, but then individually, the undersecretaries are responsible, the CFOs report to the undersecretaries, so it's matrixed.
Do you believe there's spending that happens that the VA leadership might not know or have knowledge of?
Absolutely. I mean, a $220 billion program, I mean, there are programs that I come across that I didn't realize that we necessarily had, so yes.
How do you make decisions about which projects get funded, and what's the threshold for your involvement?
Well, each administration has their own appropriations, so they have autonomy with respect to, to deciding. We work with them on the budget. We look at high priorities, secretarial priorities, sort of their execution. So it's a collaborative effort, and we, since Secretary Wilkie's been there, have greatly strengthened the governance structure. So many of these major decisions go through our governance structure, so it's a more, broad and corporate, decision-making process.
And what's the communication between the administrations?
Well, I chair the CFO Council. We meet monthly formally and then informally as needed. We have weekly unders assistance meetings. We have a VA operations board that meets twice a month. One of those is dedicated to financial issues. That would probably be one of the most significant senior. That's chaired by the deputy secretary. Sometimes the secretary attends that as well. So there's actually quite a bit, and I'm comparing this over my tenure. There's quite a bit of cross-communication, collaboration today. Early on in my tenure at the VA, there was much less so, I guess I would categorize it.
All sounds a little complex. With all of this, who are the decision makers for the FMBT project?
Me. I mean, ultimately.
Okay, and you sign off on the schedule, you sign off?
Correct.
What order, the order that everything goes in?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Who determines if the cost is reasonable? Who makes that decision?
Well, collectively, ultimately, it's my job to put the budget together and to sell it, but then, it goes through OMB, it comes to the Hill, and people make value judgments as to whether it's too expensive or not expensive enough, I guess.
The reason I was asking a lot of this series of questions is because one of the goals of the FMBT is to address the material weaknesses that the auditors have identified within the VA year after year.
Right.
And these weaknesses include the organizational structure of the department's CFO.
Right. FMBT will not address that. It will not address the organizational structure of the CFO function.
Do you think this structure needs to be reformed?
Again, this is my honest opinion. I would not change it. When I first got there, I thought, maybe it would be great if everybody reported to me. But as I became more familiar with the VA and how it operates, I frankly think that the road we're on now, which is a disciplined governance structure, is more effective. There's nothing that I can think of that I would do differently or have more access to if all of the CFOs reported directly to me. I don't know of another agency where that actually happens. I don't know if, Department of Homeland Security, I don't think they have like that sort of same structure where CFOs all report up. I know in DOD, the comptroller does not supervise or is not in control of all the service CFOs, so.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairwoman Lee. Now recognize Ranking Member Bergman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all can see the chart behind me, right? Okay, can you read anything on it? No, it's an eye chart, but that's okay because what we have done is we have packed a lot of information onto this over an expanded timeline, details of who's doing what and timelines for implementation and all of that. Is the chart behind me, is it about to be changed, updated? You got anything coming out that's gonna surprise us here with how we view this?
There is one update, I think, and Terry can speak to it, and it's actually, I think, an improvement that has to do, and I'll let actually Terry explain sort of what we did with VBA.
Yeah, so actually the last time we met with staff here, they asked us to look at VBA. Could we do VBA sooner? And so we actually met with them, met with senior leadership, met with the appropriate staff on the VBA side. We were able to move VBA in 2 years. So what we've done is CMP and voc rehab and education are now moved over with the existing CMP benefits wave. I call it a wave. Think of a wave as a discrete implementation that we're going to do. So what we did is we moved that over, so we've actually shaved 2 years off. That's the major change that you would see from, I think yours is dated August, the one that we've recently done is dated October.
And I would say, to your point, if you're asking if there are going to be any schedule slippages, there are not.
Actually, no, that's not what I was asking.
Okay.
I was asking, is there going to be any changes to the visual chart that those of us here would look at to determine where we are in the, implementation?
You mean to make it easier to read?
Well, I mean, are you thinking any, I'm leading to, I'm going to give you a little guidance.
Okay.
Okay, because it's one thing, what you have here, we see, we in the military would call it a POA&M, Plan of Action and Milestones. What I don't see, to the level of detail possible, is as we move along from year to year, if you think of just a simple pie chart of 100% of the effort that's being put in and who's got the dot, or the con, whatever you want to call it, at that time frame, you could actually, I believe, put a single pie chart above each year and predict, is it number one, the contract, who's ever implementing the system, have they got 50% of the effort or 70% of the effort? Break that pie chart down, because I would suggest if it's going to look like what we hope for and count on is a successful implementation, the migration of work effort is going to change from those creating it to those actually implementing it and using it on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And what I believe would be helpful for the committee to be able to see that transition of work effort, because what we don't want to all of a sudden see at the end is that, we dropped it into the hands of the people who are going to use it every day.
Yep.
And it doesn't work.
Yep.
Okay, so,
Got it.
having said that, I would suggest that would be helpful, at least for those of us visual learners in here, and it also, it provides, it provides a visual depiction for all those who have a dog in the fight here and at what point, because if you're the design person, you know that your work is done early on. If you're the training person, you're in the middle. If you're that end user, your efforts are going to be as you put it into practice and how you give the feedback to the design person, the implementation person, so you can iron out the inevitable bugs that will be in it. So just a thought process as we look at the totality, because let's face it, some of us who are sitting here before you today may not be on this committee when we are having a discussion, 4 or 6 years from now about where are we on the process. And what we don't need to do is, well, let's put it in the positive. What we do need to be able to do is to provide a corporate memo here on the committee level that we can, go back and forth with all of you so that we start from a shared experience and a timeline. So with that, I'll yield back at this point in the first round.
I think it's a great suggestion.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bergman. I'll now recognize Mr. Cisneros for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Secretary Rykolski, I want to ask about the training. As we discussed in the O&I hearing in September on examining VA's overpayments and data collection practices, concerns remain as to the VA's problems in reducing improper payments. While I appreciate the VA's progress in developing a functional and integrated financial management system that will help address these weaknesses, what is the VA doing to ensure staff across the agency are being trained properly on the new system and related business processes to ensure these new technologies are used effectively? And what are the current oversight mechanisms in place to ensure this for both the training itself and the new processes in place for this training module? And will these be reoccurring trainings, and if so, how frequent?
So I'm going to ask Terry Riffle to take this question because I will not do it adequate justice for the amount of time they put into the training plan.
So thank you. And I'm actually very excited that you asked me this question because I think that we're actually doing fantastic in this area. So I'll focus on NCA because that's the implementation that's underway right now. So we started actually in April doing what we call familiarization sessions, which is actually demonstrations, getting users to their first peek. Let's take a look at what it looks like. And that was after we did their initial configuration. So they're looking at what they're actually going to see. And we had about 200 users at each one of those sessions. So that was the first thing we did. Then we went to actually doing site visits. So we did what we call a district profile, where we're able to actually look at that particular cemetery and determine what are the actual users going to be? What are they going to do? Are they the guys mowing the lawn, or are they the admin people? So we were able to get in and really understand their needs. Then we went in and we actually did additional training and demonstrations pertinent to what those users were going to actually do. After each one of these sessions that we actually did a survey for them. So you talk about, let's get timely feedback. Let's make sure that what we're doing is what they need. So we learned from those. We got really positive feedback on that. The next thing that comes out after that is we do the actual hands-on instructor-led training, which is when we're getting ready to deploy. After that, and everybody's trained, then we have what we call dedicated users. I talked about this earlier, boots on the ground. People are there. They're going to handhold and be there for a while they first come up. After that, we've got another dedicated group that are customer support, that are dedicated to that organization that just came up. So if they need help after the person has left the site and they still need help, they have a dedicated group in the customer support help desk that they can call and get direct support unique to what that particular organization just came up on. So I would tell you we have a very comprehensive training and organizational plan in place as we go live.
Was this training that's going to be, how frequently is this training going to be done?
So right now, we're doing the familiarization sessions monthly, and we're in the process of doing the site visits right now. We just completed 2, and those will complete in January. And we're really working directly with the customer, in this case NCA, to drive the frequency that they want, depending on the availability of their resources and so forth, so that we can make sure that we don't want to show up if they're not ready, right? So we're working with them to make sure that we've got it right for the organization in which we're working with.
And how, as far as the site visits, how long is it going to take you to complete all the site visits?
So what we're doing is we're doing a cross-section. So we've visited the major cemeteries. So a lot of the activity in NCA, it occurs in pockets. So there's a lot more population in certain areas than others. We focused the training efforts and the dedication to the site visits where the larger stations are.
So this is, you're talking about the cemeteries right now, and I assume that's your example, but, I mean, the VA is larger than just cemeteries.
Oh, correct.
So how are we going to,
Yeah,
how long is
so-
it going to take us to do site visits to all these places?
So the way that our project is structured in terms of the methodology that we're employing is we're an agile project. So what we're doing right now is very unique and dedicated to what NCA's needs are. As we go into Veterans Benefits Administration, which we're doing right now, the model for them might look slightly different. So the way that we're structured is that we're actually doing the training, we're doing the before, during, and after dedicated based on the footprint that we see based on those site assessments on exactly what VBA needs. We'll do the same thing for VHA. In other words, it's not going to necessarily mean one training is across the board. We have to make sure that the users and the way they're going to use the system, which is quite different in VHA than it is in NCA. We have to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
All right, with that, I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Cisneros. We'll go into a second round of questioning, and I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Riffle, if I could continue on that line about the training. Thank you for walking us through some of the steps and components of the training program. I'm wondering if you can give us a scope in terms of the number of employees that need to be reached as part of the training for FMBT across the VA system.
Yeah, so right now, we probably have, and I can get you a total number, but it's over 4,000 users are going to be trained. What I will also say is that we're implementing and maintaining the invoice payment processing system, which is a huge component that a lot of our users use today. Because we're maintaining that particular interface, that services about 10,000 users, so it's reduced that population of what we would otherwise need to train.
So the number of users you cite, that's over the 10-year implementation time horizon?
That's not over the 10 years. Why don't I take that, I don't want to give you a false number. Let me take that for the record and give you an appropriate number.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to know exactly how, as this
Yeah.
time schedule that we're looking at rolls forward, what the capacity of the training program is and how many users you have to reach. That would be great. Mr. Richalski, if I can get back to the issue of the rollout schedule for FMBT, I maybe wasn't listening as intently as I should have and wanted to dive a little bit further into the issue of the schedule. Can you let us know, in terms of acceleration, what are the key points along the road here over the next 10 years, and what are the determining factors of when this time frame can be collapsed?
I think the biggest consideration is this matter of DIMLs and logic hole. If there was nothing else being deployed, I think this would be a matter of let's make sure that we can do this successfully at NCA, and concurrently we had thought about doing one VHA medical center as well as a proof of concept, but then this DIMLs thing came along, and then this DIMLs upgrade to logic hole. The big question is, does it make, I think technically people agree, it makes more sense to connect one time. And to connect one time, we have to delay our schedule with VHA. So the big question is, as we roll these out, is there a significant benefit to rolling it out early, doing 2 connections, 2 major training initiatives, or not? That's sort of the big question in my mind.
And so how many key milestones are there
You mean to make that?
that will be decision points?
That's a tough question. The first decision point for me is can we successfully deploy this to NCA? The next decision point is how smoothly does DIMLs implementation go at IOC? And then I think the third question is how disruptive, third decision point, which would be later this year, how disruptive would it be to try and connect FMBT to DIMLs as that goes in? So at least in this year, there are 3 major decision points, and I would think after that, it would be a matter of, another one would be what benefit is there to waiting for logic hole, or based upon what we know this year, moving it up and connecting twice.
So next year, when will you be able to come back to our committee with something a little bit firmer?
I think in the, I would say in the 4th quarter of the calendar year, October, November, December. By then, DIMLs will have rolled out in the Pacific Northwest. EHRM will have deployed as well, and we will have NCA, and we'll be deep into VBA. So we'll have a lot more intel on how this is going.
Okay. Mr. Richalski, you were here in September. The O&I subcommittee did a hearing about debt management.
Yes.
And we're very concerned about the pressures that this places on individual veterans. I'm wondering if you can talk about FMBT and the role it might play in helping the department address the overpayment and debt issue for veterans.
I may have to ask Terry to help me. I don't know what direct effect FMBT will have on, for example, the creation of debt. A lot of that has to do with notification of things, as you know, like education or change in spouse or things like that. That's principally, the majority of those things create the veteran debt and generate the overpayment. I don't know that FMBT is going to have a substantial impact on that.
Well, one of the issues that came out of that hearing was the fact that different systems weren't always talking to one another, and I didn't know if implementation.
Yeah, this is probably not the case. I think there it has to do with things like when somebody's incarcerated and they're in a system, that information getting over to the VBA so they know when someone gets married or divorced or things like that, when they go to school, if they drop a class, those types of systems, but less so the accounting, unfortunately, in this case. But this, as we've sort of described, systems here will help vendor payments, for example, companies, things like that for contractual services, goods. that'll be expedited
Okay.
and more accurate.
My time has expired. Thank you very much for your responses. I'll now turn it over to Ranking Member Bergman for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. You know, my first 5 minutes, we talked about timelines. Let's talk about money this time. I want to dig, Mr. Rochalski, I want to dig into the cost and the schedule, but especially the cost. You know, FMBT's original life cycle cost estimate was, you know, $887 million under USDA. As we know, you know, USDA pulled out. So right before they pulled out, it increased to $1.0009 billion. Then it spiked to $2.34 billion without much explanation after, you know, VA took over. And I note that your testimony says alternately $2.4 billion and $2.5 billion. So can you tell, you know, as best you can, what the correct number is, and whatever number you give, how confident are you, you know, however you want to put the percentages on it, that's your call. But what do you think?
So the current number, as I know it, is 2.5. Being very candid, I don't have high confidence, but I don't say that because I think the cost is going to go up. It's just, I mean, factually, I don't know, you know, I'll leave it at that. I have low confidence. I mean, I think in things in terms of trying to accelerate the schedule, which would change the cost and things like that. I think that some of the changes to the cost estimate are a function of, as you mentioned, USDA. The first cost estimate was based upon their work. I don't know that that cost estimate was accurate. And when I came over and saw the cost estimate of $800 million for doing this system-wide, that just didn't make sense. I mean, that was, to me, too low. We've since done additional cost estimates, but what I've learned through the years, both as a consultant and, you know, sort of doing CFO functions, is until you get a couple of sites under your belt, some experience, then you kind of know what it's going to cost. At this point, it's sort of all theoretical. I saw this in DoD when we rolled out the electronic health record. We had wildly changing cost estimates, wildly changing scenarios for systems that we're going to save money on and sunset and not. So I think my experience just tells me I have low confidence at this point because we're so early into it. I would be happy to come back with you, and I'm sure you'll insist that I do so once we have more experience and I can provide you more confidence with our cost estimates.
Well, and just listening to you talk, having been in similar shoes at a different time in life in uniform and having to apply cost estimates to implementation of everything from weapon systems to readiness systems, it was a moving target. In listening to you talk, I would suggest potentially for the committee here and for all of you and anybody else, as we talked about, you know, maybe modifying the chart here to add who's got the dot percentage-wise of the effort at that point. It probably would be helpful for all of us to see as cost estimates revise, whether they be up or down, based upon updated data as to where you are. It's kind of like you're doing a check of this. Are we getting, if we're spending $1 million on this, is it going to be 1.2 or is it going to be 0.8, whatever it happens to be? But that kind of fidelity would be helpful.
Agreed.
You know, what drove, do you think, the schedule to stretch out from 2025 to 2028 to 2030 originally? What was the driver on that?
I think I'll ask Terry to chime in as well, but I think the number one driver was the number of waves that we were able to accommodate at any one time, and then beyond that, it was the shifting of VHA to the right. But Terry, you can.
Yeah, the main thing was we worked with the administrations and staff offices, our direct customers who have to support the actual success of the implementation to drive the roadmap on what we knew was achievable. So as Mr. Rykowski said, that drove the number of waves. It expanded them slightly so that we could actually ensure that we'd be successful. And then the secondary thing is the alignment with logical. So pushing it out to 2030 is the direct alignment with logical.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Chairwoman Lee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mr. McCune. What is the OIT's responsibility in regards to developing, implementing, and funding enterprise-wide technology projects?
That's a big question. So clearly, the development of enterprise systems falls within our lane. There are a number of ongoing large programs today. Many of them have been talked about here. Mission Act, COLMRI, FMBT, EHRM, and DIMLS. So those fall within the OI&T space.
Is the FMBT any different than these other large technology modernization projects, and can you explain why or why not?
Sure. I think it is a little bit more mature. It is a little older. It started in 16, so we've had a little bit more time to stand up and structure the program. So in my mind, it's a little bit more mature, largely due to time.
I want to shift now. I'm concerned about what happened with this $14 million that was designated as coming from IT dollars. Did OIT actually commit that funding? And if so, when did it get changed and why?
So I will answer your question, and I will also defer to our CFO, who's sitting to my right. From an IT perspective, we are still recovering from that change of USDA leaving us. So we had a financial plan in place. When they left, we had to restart the financial planning, and that's a 2-year cycle. So we're still catching up from that. The other thing that's in play here are the multiple priorities within OI&T for funding, and again, those names that I just mentioned are all competing for the same amount of money. Mr. Rachowski, everything you want to add to that?
So, Ms. Riffle, due to this $14 million shortfall we discussed, the VA planned to reduce or eliminate funding for the independent verification and validation steps. These steps it's a critical piece of the program support that allows for third-party verification of product development. Does the VA continue to face this funding shortfall, and will it not be funding these IV&V activities?
So right now, we still have IV&V actively engaged, and right now we're in the midst of system integration testing, so they're actively engaged in the program. We are still looking for the results of the VA unfunded requirement process. We expect to have favorable results from that, which would allow us to maintain them in the future. So we look forward to hearing that probably within the next couple of weeks.
Can
In the
you walk
interim,
me
we're
through that
using.
process? Walk me through that process.
Well, I can walk you through. There are many claimants for IT, dollars, as we've described. So we have a process that we're going through to take a look and, basically to fund the neediest cases. I think FMBT will score very high. When you go through the list of claimants, some things you can tell are like very, very important, high risk. Some would be nice to have enhancements. The problem is, I think in the past, they haven't done a good job of sort of vetting those, and so they would run to IT and say, hey, we got this requirement, and they would be sort of left to their own devices to figure out what to do. We have a more structured process now. I mentioned the governance structure that's working on it. And then we have a long-term sort of requirements development process that will instill more discipline. So even though we do have many claimants, I think we have a better process that we're putting in place to manage it.
And who makes that decision? Who's making those decisions?
So ultimately, this will go to the Deputy Secretary, to the VA Operations Board that I mentioned, and then below that, my office, the Office of Enterprise Integration and IT, have a process that we are collaboratively working on to vet the requirements and ensure that we have adequate development funding, and then in the long term, adequate sustainment funding.
Okay, sounds very complicated. What happens if they don't choose this as a critical need?
Well, we wouldn't then we wouldn't deploy FMBT, but I think that is not likely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Ranking Member Banks for 5 minutes.
Mr. Rachowski, I want to ask some questions about the VA's adoption of DIMLS. You decided to wait for Logical to become available, which means the implementation of FMBT in the VHA cannot begin until 2023. Please walk me through how you weighed the pros and cons and made that decision. And if you could briefly discuss, or you did briefly discuss this already, but can you give me some numbers as to the cost impact of and how that affected your decision-making?
Yes, I can. I'll start to help me with the cost. But basically, the decision was, again, I mentioned this is a unique time because we're deploying this DIMBL system. And then we found out that while they're deploying it, the Army, which sort of owns the DIMBL system, DoD, they're going to upgrade it. And so the decision came back, and we looked at different excursions. Should we connect to the current client-server base and then later go back and reconnect and train for logical? From a technical perspective, and maybe Dan McCune has an opinion on this, the advice was you only want to connect one time and train one time. And so that would require us delaying, and that was the basis for that decision. The cost associated with it, I'm going to ask Terry if she can refresh my memory what that meant for cost savings. We may have to take that for the record. There was some cost savings associated with it. I don't have the figure immediately, but it was fairly substantial, I think.
Okay, let's move on.
Yep.
Mr. Rashowski, the local version of DIMLS is being installed in Washington State right now.
Yes.
In conjunction with EHRM. Is it going to be replaced when logical becomes available?
Yes. Eventually it will be. Yes.
Okay. Mr. McCune, I understand there are 120 system interfaces involved in FMBT. That's significantly more interfaces than there are in EHRM. How many of these interfaces are simply going away when the legacy systems are retired, and how many do you actually have to build?
So that is an easier question to answer for NCA than it is for the entire system. I'm not sure that the EHRM interface count will probably go up. I think it's around 72 for Go Live, which is in March. That number will go up outside of the Go Live. In terms of FMBT, there are 28 interfaces that will go live for NCA, and so I don't think it is dramatically more than it is for EHR.
Could you provide us with the specific numbers for the record?
Yes,
to the
sir,
best
I
of your
will.
ability. Mr. McCune, what are CGI's systems integration responsibilities as the prime contractor, and what are VA's systems integration responsibilities?
So CGI is our system integrator. They're largely in charge of the development and integration of the systems. They have government oversight, and so my development teams, my IT teams oversee CGI and their work.
Okay. Mr. Rashowski, back to you. How is the VA better positioned to replace its financial and accounting systems now compared to 10 years ago when Flight was abandoned and 15 years ago when Core FLS was abandoned?
So I had that same question when I came 2 years ago. How are we better positioned? I think we're better positioned because we have built strong relationships, which and a governance structure around it. I think it's because it's VA-led, to be honest. I think we know our business the best. I think we have good people in place.
Okay.
I feel very confident about this, and I was not so much 2 years ago, but I really do today.
You've already spent about $380 million on the program. You are going to install part of the Momentum system in NCA next year and install the remainder in 2021. When will you have a fully functioning system that represents a return on the investment?
Well, I think a fully functioning system across VA is going to be 10 years. I mean, we're really getting the full return on it when it's fully deployed.
Okay. Are you sure that implementing the system in NCA constitutes a significant return on investment by itself?
I do. I think, and the big thing for us is proving that we can successfully deploy it, the training, people can use it, it has the functionality that we need. I think all of that is critically important. That's our next big thing, and we've got to knock it out of the ballpark.
And even if NCA has a great accounting system and the books look great, but VBA and VHA are still a mess, does that really change anything?
Well, it's the first increment of a major change. I think it does change, yeah. I mean, when you look at the two failed attempts we've had in the past, it proves that we can do it, we can bring it up and have a modern CFO Act financial system.
Okay.
Thank you. We've had a request for a third round of questioning, so I'll turn it over to Chairwoman Lee for 5 minutes.
I just wanted to touch base on the integration with this project and EHRM, which we're overseeing. Is it safe to say that there's a lot going on? It's safe to say that there's a lot going on, and I'm unclear how this is being managed from an enterprise level in terms of development of program and program governance. The schedule for FMBT has already been changed once to align with VHA's implementation of Logical. Ms. Riffle, how vulnerable is FMBT to changes in plans for other systems that it must interface with?
So I think it's prudent upon us to make sure that we've got Plan B in place. So, for example, we've all talked about the complexity of not only our program, but then, adding the other two initiatives on top. So obviously, we need to have Plan B that if we need to go on our own, that we're able to do that. And so I think that's what we have in place, and that's what we'll be able to execute. So although we have reliance on others, we're not going to be, stuck if one of the other initiatives ends up getting in trouble. We'll have the ability to go forward. So I think that's the most prudent thing that we have to do. You never know the unknowns, right? So I think one of the things that we have that I'm very proud of is the flexibility in which we operate. One of the things that Mr. Bergman asked us about was putting in place what I'm going to call really deciphering the individual project plan so that we can show who's doing what and where that pie is. We can actually do that very well, and I'd like to make sure that you see that so that you understand the degree in which we're able to show you. And because of that, we have the flexibility to be able to adapt for those, ever-changing things that will happen in VA. So I think we're positioned to do that.
Mr. McCune, what does the Office of Enterprise Integration do to facilitate this type of mitigation strategy?
Yeah, so the Office of OEI is in charge of those large enterprise-wide decisions. So prioritization between the large programs would largely fall on their plate, and they report directly to the DepSec.
What's the OEI's role in coordinating activities between the projects and deconflicting issues between the program offices?
Yeah, so they facilitate meetings, coordination meetings across the programs. I've been in attendance in a number of those.
Okay. Who has oversight for all of this IT modernization?
So ultimately, our CIO is in charge of all IT actions, and we're working with the administrations on the prioritization, and I think also bringing in OEI to help us arbitrate when there's conflicting priorities.
So that's the person who's watching to make sure that one program office changes doesn't undo the other.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members have any questions? Seeing none, just one additional, just curious if you've looked at the life cycle of this system once fully implemented. How long is it, and when do we have to do this all over again?
I think this will last as long as the B-52, so factually I don't know. I think this is it's a modern CFO Act compliant system. It's cloud-based. We will participate in the upgrades made to it, and so hopefully for many years to come it will be, but I don't know if maybe Dan knows from an IT perspective.
Yeah, I think I would refer to the B-52 life cycle as well. It's really unclear. This is a modern SaaS system, so this is a kind of a brand new. I guess F maybe 35 would be the more modern example, but this is a brand new system, very modern. So predicting what that life cycle is really outside my scope, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Before closing today's hearing, just a few observations. This morning we heard from VA officials that strengthening financial management within the department is a critical goal, and you have everyone up here in agreement. Financial management is something that spans every VA administration facility. It cannot be understated that FMBT is a major undertaking, high risk, high reward, as it was said here this morning. And successful implementation will also depend on how well VA employees are trained and whether the department can institute improved and standardized business processes across a highly decentralized agency. Creating a modern system that allows for accurate and complete accounting, budgeting, and planning will take a department-wide effort. However, we also heard that the current timeline would see a completion date 10 years from now, and this is simply too long. VA's promised to reconsider and likely shorten this timeline by as much as half, but we won't see the details until sometime next year. I fully expect that VA will continue to keep our committee members and staff informed of any developments. We need this project to succeed. My fear is that we will sit here during a future committee hearing, say 12 months from now, and learn that VA is still planning for completion in another 10 years, and I think that will be unacceptable. Improving VA's financial management must remain a high priority. Chair Lee and Ranking Member Bergman and Banks, I believe we should continue to work together during the coming months as this story unfolds. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ranking Member Bergman if you have any closing comments.
Well, I guess maybe I'm the only one here in the room that's older than to be 52. And having said that, I'm not sure what my life cycle is. But the point is, we know a long time ago when we built airplanes, we didn't know how long they would last, so we did certain things to ensure that as long as you kept them out of corrosion and kept them well maintained, they would function without end, if you will. The reality is that in the cycle of digital advance that we live in, I don't usually say 100%, but I can guarantee to 100% there's going to be some really cool new app, new capability that's going to come out somewhere in mid-implementation cycle. The only thing, and that's why I suggested about how we visualize on who's working on what, don't be like the bird and the shiny nickel and get off track for what seems really cool at the time, but in the end is only just something that's, again, hot for the moment. If we maintain the integrity of the system as we go from crawl to walk to run, we will get that 80+% benefit in a digital environment, if you will. You are the stewards of the day-to-day. What we are here as elected members of Congress, we are that, if you will, in some cases, that executive board that will figure out ways to logically allocate or reallocate money based upon the performance of you all. And that's our partnership in there. But in the end, just remember, if that veteran does not receive the goods and services that they rate, we will have failed, no matter how quickly or how long that we take to do this. But we're partners in this, and I look forward to staying in the partnership with you for a very long time, assuming my life cycle continues. Thank you.
I'll now turn it over to Chairwoman Lee for 5 minutes, or for any closing comments you may have.
No, I just, from the complexity of this project to the rolling timeline to basically decisions that will need to be made further into the future, I personally am concerned about the $2.5 billion estimate and the 10-year estimate. And, again, we understand the complexity of this. We'd like transparency and to be kept abreast of as things change rather than after the fact to have that knowledge. That'd be helpful. So wishing you all the best of luck. This is an important project, and we certainly are here to work with you on it.
Well, thank you. I wish to express my appreciation to the witnesses for appearing today and providing your testimony, your thoughts, and your expertise. Members will have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material. And without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.